There you go. Got it? All right, so we're gonna pick up, our page numbering is probably gonna be different at this point because I've taken blanks, so but it bumps your page numbering down. So we're gonna pick up at the introduction and introduction challenges page. In mine, it's page 17, but that could be different for you. So let me know when you have found that. It's really simple. You guys already know each other. So challenge number 1 is to introduce yourselves to each other. But I think you already know each other. So I think you know who I am. So we're gonna skip challenge 1. I do put in here, I strongly recommend that you complete this course with at least one other person. I'm gonna share that for those who are not here, those who will be watching on the video. I know that there may be some who don't have someone else taking it with them. It would be really good then to be as involved in the Facebook group that we're gonna set up as possible. And if you have someone in your church or a spouse or somebody who can help keep you accountable and walk through these things, because ministry to the fatherless tends to be a really big undertaking. And having done it for years by myself, I can tell you it can be overwhelming. So I do encourage people to take this with at least one other person, a group of people. It helps with accountability and it provides encouragement when things get difficult, and they will get difficult. So, challenge number 2, introduce yourself in our online community. So for those of you who have your device open, there should be a link right there in your on your page. You should be able to click on it, and it'll take you straight to our Facebook page. And go ahead and just put on there who you are, where you're from, how you heard about the course, what drew you to it, what you hope to learn. That's important because that will help me as we're preparing for our lessons. And go ahead and also share your apprehensions about stepping out into this new area of ministry. What are things that are concerning to you? And if you don't have a device with you, you can do it when you get home. But I would like everyone to be a part of it.
It's not letting us,
We click on,
we join, but it's pending.
Oh, so I
Yeah,
have
it's
to go
just
in.
So
it's
it's
a
like
she has
to tell us that we can.
And that's
Is it allowing you to type a,
nope.
okay, so let me just go in there.
so I click create a new account.
No.
No, honey, just
Log
sign
in.
in here, put your thing up there. Oh, you're not on yet?
Okay, let's see. Lydia, you're approved. You should be. Well,
Maybe not.
Maybe
The
not.
Facebook doesn't open.
oh, it's trying to do a tour. Okay, Lydia,
Should be.
Esther, Joanna. Should be everybody.
How do I do one?
Go ahead.
Let's do something here.
Well, it's not everybody yet. Did you guys get in yet?
Mhm.
You'll get there, okay.
Oh, you're not in, you're not signed in.
This
What's your
group
password?
Is just for anyone who ever takes this course, correct?
Mhm. And I've been in groups like this that are usually focused on a book. I've been in writers groups like this, or creatives groups like this, or people who are taking other types of courses, and I found them very helpful because they're a place where you can ask questions, where people are also maybe have the same questions, or maybe they've already experienced it, and you can share your ideas, you can share your questions. You can say, hey, we're facing this situation. How would you handle it? Different things like that. Now, at this point, it's primarily the people in this room, the others who are taking this course, myself, Marta, and we have one other person from another church who will be joining us. I'm hoping to bring in some of our volunteers from Billings as well. We'll see if we can have we're going to be having yogurt together on Saturday, so I'm going to be encouraging some more people to get
So
involved.
we're supposed to put our name on, write our name like a little.
Yeah, just take a few minutes to introduce yourself, share what you're hoping to learn in the course, what maybe your apprehensions are about this type of ministry. I think I know how most of you heard about it, so probably don't have to share that, what drew you to it? Because those types of things, not only will it kind of give us an insight into how each other are thinking, but it'll help me as I'm preparing the lessons and going from here. I hear lots of typing, that's good.
Who can do it first?
So if you're on the video and you're watching us on the video, this would be a good time for you to do the same thing. No, I think it shouldn't take too much longer, I wouldn't think.
Will get Uncle Kim in here later.
Okay, that's fine.
It's not signed in and we have to figure out his password and stuff.
That's fine. We can do that later.
I'm not signed into what?
Facebook, online, on your computer. He signed into it on his phone, but not on his.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
I can just shut it down and try to get in.
What?
I'll just wait, I
Sick Jonathan on it.
Jonathan would be delighted if
Yes.
I do that.
Do you still need a couple more minutes?
Well, why wouldn't I get on Facebook on my computer?
Yeah, I can't figure out why you can't get on it right now.
I don't know. Oh. It's a problem with Safari,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna mess with it now.
So let me know, let me know when you're done. And that way, are you done?
I haven't posted it yet.
That's okay.
I'm almost done.
I think mine is pretty. Pretty, it's not as good as you guys.
Let me read you guys first.
Yeah.
And then you can just dab or copy and paste.
I don't know.
June Backhouse's mom is feeling fast.
Oh.
Seemed like a pretty, you know her, so.
She's what?
Her mom is failing very fast. She's in hospice right now. June Backhouse.
Back.
Bacchus.
are we doing? So I've got yours, yours. So Joanna and Lydia, are you still working on yours? Okay, that's fine.
But I can listen and while you go, if you need to like this.
Okay. So the next section that we would normally be looking at would be the introduction to the theme verse, and I'm just going to cover it a little bit for those who are not part of this group or in other groups. I think having a theme verse for what you're doing is very important. This is a biblical ministry, and it's important to remember that and to have something to come back to. And at FTN, we actually have 3 that we kind of keep at the forefront of our mind. One is suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not, which of course is where we get our name. For of such is the kingdom of God, Mark 10:14. Then Hosea 14:3, which we talked about earlier today. Asher shall not save us, we will not ride upon horses, neither will we say any more to the work of our hands, ye are our gods, for in thee the fatherless findeth mercy. And 2 Timothy 4:17 really is just or 4:7 is just kind of a bolster and a reminder. It's not only what we need to do, but it's what we need to be encouraging the ladies that we work with to do. And that is, I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. There are a lot of times when the ladies we're working with are ready to quit. And this is a good thing to point them to and say, hey, we need to finish the course, we need to fight the fight. And most importantly, we need to keep the faith and continue to follow the Lord in these things. So each of these verses reminds us of specific needs, aspects, and truths that are vital to carrying out the ministry God has given us. So through the course, normally, you would be developing this as you go, looking at your why, your how, your what, and prayerfully choosing a theme verse that goes along with what you'll be doing. The next one, also, you guys already have a purpose statement. So that's not something that you're going to be going into. For those who are not in this group, I think it would be really good to be looking into this, especially if you're a group. If it's an individual, it's a little bit different, but it's not a bad idea to sit down and write, this is the purpose, what I'm doing this for. And again, as we would go through, we would be looking at our why, our how, and our what, and eventually our who and our when and where as well. So what we're going to focus on is called a vision story. So I don't know what page it'll be on there for you guys, but I'm just going to read the introduction to this and we'll go through some goals and tips, and then we will get into our assignments and we'll be done. So when I first heard the idea of a vision story, I was enthralled. I saw so many possibilities. I wondered if I could ever truly sit down and write such a story for FTN, but then I realized that in various ways and places I had already been doing it, and every time I did, it filled me with hope and excitement for the future. That is one of the primary goals of writing a vision story. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What, you might ask, is a vision story? A vision story is just that, a story you write about your ministry, but it isn't like a biography or a history book that tells the story of the past. A vision story is written in present tense and set in the future. Not the too distant future, but far enough that what takes place in your descriptive narrative is realistically possible. A vision story might go something like this. Our ministry has now been operational for 3 years. Here we have an atmosphere of love based on a spirit of service. We reach out to fatherless families because we strongly believe this is God's calling for His children. We do this by walking alongside of these families in their daily journey. Often our work involves tutoring children at our church, meeting with moms in our fellowship hall to research economical ways to manage a home kitchen, sharing the knowledge we have gained in computer systems with women and children who've never had the opportunity to learn them elsewhere, and so on. At this moment, you might not have a single one of those things going on, but maybe they, or something else God has or will put on your heart during this process, are things you want on your radar for the future. The goal of this story is to give yourself something to aim for, dream about, work toward, and most importantly, pray about. Below is additional information to help you in this process. So I think this is a really exciting exercise to do. I think it's just like last night when we were having the question and answer time. the question that I was asked is, what do you see down the road for FTN? I love that question because it keeps us looking down the road and helps us not get stuck where we are. And that leads to growth rather than just spinning our wheels in the mud, because it helps us to look at how do we get out of the mud. So here are some goals for the vision story. A vision story should describe what your ministry does, how it does it, and why, 3 years in the future. Writing it in the present tense gives a sense of attainability and allows you to sort of set yourself in that place. So those are the key things to remember. You're going to be writing it in the 3 years in the future. You're going to be writing it in the present tense. And it should be something that's truly attainable. You don't want to be like, in 3 years, we're going to have a $50 million property with a college, and I don't know, maybe that's your goal, but it's a big, big goal. So it should be something that's attainable. And it's important to keep in mind that God can do much, much more than we can ever ask or think as we look at attainability, but also it should be like, it should make sense what you're putting down there. A vision story should be 1 to 5 pages. Some people even create their stories in a document that allows them to frame it and hang it where they will see it often. If too long for framing, you could also keep copies handy in report covers. This helps to keep the goal in mind. So let's look at some vision story writing tips. Use the information covered in each section, why, how, or what, to help you formulate your story. Again, do this prayerfully. So in each section, you'll work on a portion of your vision story. You'll work first on your why. Why are we doing this? And you'll accumulate that information and start putting it into a format that can tell the story of where you are 3 years down the road. When you get to the how, you'll start looking at the mindset of how do we approach this? And you'll start incorporating those things. How do we, what attitude do we approach the women and children or the families that we're working with? What do we take an approach of going out and beating them over the head with what we want them to do, or do we take a we're going to walk alongside of you approach, or do we take a mentoring approach? How are we doing that, and why? You know, what is that? What has developed that mindset? What's behind that mindset? Then you'll get to the what, and you'll get into the specifics of what you do. And it may be that when you put your final story together, they may not come in that why, how, what, like exactly in that order, but you'll be able to, you have the information, you'll be able to blend it together to create the whole work. This is a chance to think and pray big, especially in communicating your why. Be inspirational. How is what you're doing allowing those involved in the ministry to change the world? Remember, we're thinking present tense 3 years down the road. How does it challenge those involved? How is it innovative? Inspire imagination. So in other words, you get to be really creative. The next thing, and this is very important, be specific. For instance, the example above could continue along the lines of, we are currently working with 10 children in our tutoring center. We have 5 volunteers who help us in this effort. So you notice now you're getting into the details. We have 10 and 5. Those are important things. We have several local Christian-owned businesses have partnered with us with financial investments to purchase the needed curriculum and supplies. So that tells how, not only who is doing it, what numbers are doing it, but also includes some of where the support for it is coming from. That's going to be an important part of your ministry. This gives several specifics to pray and shoot for. It tells how many you are reaching through this program, who is working with them, and how it is being supported. You may have none of those things in place at this moment, but you can prayerfully work toward them. And when the going gets tough, you can walk up to that frame on the wall or notebook on the table and be reminded where you're headed, how, and why. You could even expound on some of these details, such as, we choose volunteers who have a heart for the Lord, are strong in character, are compassionate toward others, and to excel in their area of service. Or, We accept children in our tutoring program who have no one to help them at home, either from a deficiency of time, training, or concern. The children must show themselves to be diligent, respect those teaching them, and consistently complete their assignments. The possibilities, as they say, are endless. Any questions on that? That was a big paragraph. Okay? Be sure to consider how you'll be getting the word out and bringing people in 3 years from now. This is a question I get a lot. Well, how do you get referrals? How do you get people into your ministry? Where do you find the ladies that you work with? And my honest answer is, we pray that the Lord will bring us the women that we can work with. We're small. We don't have a huge pool of resources that we can pull from. So if I go and I say to La Vie, which is our local pregnancy center, send us all your ladies and we'll do a parenting class for them, and we'll do this and we'll do this. And we don't have the resources for that right now. We do have, La Vie does know about us. We got a referral from them recently to do the clothing exchange. So there are specific places that we have said, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is who we help. But it's important to pray about that. What is our method of outreach? You guys have a really good method of outreach that you've already put into place. Does it need to be, grown, expanded? What do you need to do? Are there corrections you need to make? We'll put that into your vision story. Where do you want to be with your outreach in 3 years? Those are, like I said, the possibilities are endless as far as what you could go with that. But this is something you're going to work on together as a group. So I would recommend having a plan for how you as a group will work on this together. And we'll get into that a little bit further at the bottom. Be sure to consider how you get the word out. Okay, we just talked about that. This is a vital part of the story and of your ministry. Once the basics are in place, choose someone the group trusts to complete the final version. Leave it to them. If you trusted it to them in the first place, honor them by respecting and accepting their work. If you are the writer, allow for revisions. Set a definite number of revisions for each portion of the story. 3 is recommended. So I suggest this because you may have somebody in your group who is a strong writer that you all feel confident could write it well. And I think it'd be good to allow that person to do that. If you wanted to communicate the vision very clearly. Maybe you have somebody in your group who absolutely hates writing and doesn't want to touch it. That's fine, they don't have to. But whoever you choose, if you choose them as a group, you need to respect and honor their ability to do it. If you're the writer, you need to respect that others may want to do some revisions and be open to that. And I think it's important to set a limited number of revisions, because otherwise it can just go on and 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 on. So I would say for each section, set a limited number of revisions, and it doesn't have to be 3. 3 is a good number for revisions. It tends to work things out, but set a limited number of revisions and just work together. And I think it'll be a lot of fun, because you're getting to dream about the future, and then getting to put it on a piece of paper and have something to aim for.
Could I ask a question? Like the revisions, it'd be like in each section, you're only gonna change 3 things?
No, 3 rounds.
3
rounds.
Yeah.
So you might come to it and it's all been written out, and you get together and you read through it, and as you're talking about it, you think, oh, this doesn't actually express what I meant when we talked about it in the group. So you say, this is what I actually meant, and you talk about it, and then you decide, okay, this is how we're going to include it, and you rewrite it, you bring it back, you go through it again, and just work through it. And I would say probably 3 times gives everybody a really good opportunity to fully express what they're meaning. And I know when I've worked with others who are working on that type of project, usually they limit it to 2 or 3. They might go as far as 4, but once you get to that point, it starts becoming stressful. So I would say do your best to limit it to 2 or 3 revisions, and then you'll have time as you do your why section. You do your revisions. you go on to the how section. Well, you're gonna end up reading through the why again, and you may catch things. And everybody will say, oh, we need to switch those 2 words, or something like that. So you're gonna have the full, I think it's 4 months that we're ending up with, to be working on it. And just work on it and work through it. And it should be a fun activity.
I'm making a decision between this and that.
Yeah, like making a decision between this and that. Okay, so here's something to think of down the future. Return to your story periodically, say once every 6 months to a year. Review it. Are you on the same track? Should your story change a little? Maybe get a little bigger, or perhaps incorporate opportunities that have arisen that you never imagined. And this is really important. Don't do this during a time of discouragement. Wait those times out. Remember that we don't know what God is doing in those seasons. We cannot see the full picture. Trust that He has a plan, and He'll let you know your part when it's time. So don't, basically the old saying, don't doubt in the darkness what God showed you in the light. There are going to be hard times, but that doesn't mean that God is changing everything that He told you you were supposed to do. There are times when you're going to face discouragement or disappointment, but that doesn't mean that the path that you set out on, knowing full well that the God was where God wanted you, was wrong. So I don't recommend changing your overall path in the midst of those difficult times. Just keep going and keep walking. And like what we were talking about, the verse we were talking about this morning, be still and know that He is God. Okay, and if you want some more information on writing vision stories, a lot of this information was taken from Michael Hyatt's podcast, 4 Steps to Communicating Vision. And I included a link there, and you can read or listen to it from that page. So, any questions on vision stories? Do you want to go ahead and kind of set up how you're going to approach it as a group?
Is this vision story something that you are constantly rewriting? So you write it for 3 years and 3 years, and in 3 years you write another one?
I would come back and just review it and say 6 months from when you wrote it, when you finished it, and look at it and see, where are we? Are we still headed on the same path? Do we need to adjust? But I wouldn't rewrite it all the time. Maybe a year from now.
Yeah,
and
so
put it
once
3 years
you
beyond there.
put it 3 years in
Mhm.
advance, once you reach 3 years from when you wrote it,
Yeah,
write another one for the
Yeah.
next 3 years.
yeah, you can definitely do that. And it's just a tool. It is not to replace the Holy Spirit.
And it's not really the law of the Medes and the Persians.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is, like in 6 months, if God has opened the door to something that's even greater,
Mm-hmm.
you can add that into it
Mhm.
because there are more possibilities.
Right.
And in a year, it's good, sometimes it's good to revisit every year
Mm-hmm.
and maybe make a little bit of a revision,
Exactly.
but.
And you know what? There's a delete key on the computer, and it's there for a reason. And you can always edit, and you can copy and paste here. So if you need to move something, and maybe something because of something else God has brought that you thought was going to be primary is now sort of a secondary thing, and you need to copy and paste it into a less prominent part of what you envisioned. That's totally fine. It's just here so that when you are in those discouraging times, to be able to pick it up and not say, oh, we're not there yet, but to say, okay, this is where we're headed. We may not be able to see it and reach out and touch it right now, but this is where we're headed. This is what God has put on our hearts, and we just need to keep following it. And that's why it says be inspirational as you write it, because when you come back and review it, chances are maybe you're the one who's going to need to be inspired. So keep that in mind. I don't know if you guys want to just get together as a group later and decide how you're going to work on, who's going to do the writing, or maybe a couple of you are going to do the writing. When do you want to? Basically, the 3 portions will be due at the end of each part. So it'll be due at the end of part 1, part 2, and part 3. I don't know if you want to have times, set up a time when you're working on your group activities. That's something that I'm gonna let you guys decide, but then let me know what your plan is, okay? Because there's this and there's a couple of other things that we're gonna be talking about as well. This is important, but a lot of the other stuff is probably gonna take up more of your time. This is just kind of one of those things that goes along with each group. You have something to say? No? Just stretching?
Okay, just for clarification, at the end of part 1, part 2, and part 3, are you talking about within this lesson here?
No, within the course.
Okay.
So there's basically three sections of the story that we're gonna read, 3 types of information for the story. Why, how, and
Yes.
what. And so developing that information, and then by the end, by the conclusion, I think it's actually 2 lessons before the conclusion, it all needs to be pulled together, because you're gonna use it also to help build some of the other things that you're doing, some of the projects you're doing. Anything else?
Do you want me, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do you want me to do a separate one, since
If you want to.
my ministry is different than,
You can do that if you want to, yeah.
I mean, I can participate with
Yeah,
that
you
as
can
well.
still,
What?
you can still.
Okay.
Participate.
Is that gonna be too much trying to do 2 of them? Is that gonna
No,
be too much? Maybe.
I don't know.
Okay,
Find out.
let me know if it is.
Okay, so the next class is gonna be some 4th, 5th of October?
Third.
Third, okay. So, are we gonna be doing that like in a group, like whoever's taking it, we meet here, or whatever, you know, and we do the classes, gonna be done at home?
I think it's gonna be done at home, and we're going to set up Zoom, which is sort of like Skype, but it's
That's
a little
where I'm,
different.
where I'm headed with this. is
Okay,
We probably need to set aside a time. Yes, about whether we wanna do it now.
Mhm.
You're thinking practical right now?
I'm thinking real practical, probably today is not a good time, because we have certain things we get ready for tomorrow.
Right.
But we need to have a time, that's why I was asking,
Mhm.
where those that are doing this, going through this, we need to have a time to talk about it.
Mhm.
Paul and Jonathan are taking the
Yeah.
class as well as Joel and Aaron. Is Ruthie taking it too?
She signed up, and I've got her included in the emails.
Are Ben and Jenny?
I don't think,
haven't
they
heard
didn't
that.
say anything about it to me, for sure.
We're recording all of this, sorry.
Well, the point that what
No,
I'm
I was
saying,
curious to know who we have to include.
okay,
Not have to
without
include
giving
you.
names or
Mhm.
anything, what I'm saying is, we probably need to set up a time where we can, having gone through this, and others that aren't here,
Mhm.
go through this to where we could, do something
Mhm.
and maybe plan maybe a couple times, you know,
Mhm.
whatever, I mean,
I think it would be good if you have a way to have, I mean, a lot of this you might be able to do on your own, but there will be times when you'll have to meet as a group and bring all of your information together.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, each one of us should be writing out our thoughts,
Mhm.
correct?
Mhm.
On our own, and then we combine them into our why.
Mhm. Right, yes, and then there are gonna be assignments, like the worksheets, you probably saw some of the worksheets that we're gonna be working on. Some of those, I think the best way for you to approach them will be for one person to do one portion, another person to do another portion, another person to do another portion, and bring all the information together. So you're gonna have times when you can bring everybody together.
now the vision, let me get the word right here.
Vision story.
Story is to be done at the end of this first part. Is that,
It will go through the whole thing. So at the first part, you just need to have your why. And it doesn't have to be the complete story. It may just be that you're gathering information for, this is what we want to see us doing. This is what our why should be. Not only now, but 3 years from now. Your
also,
why really shouldn't change much.
the vision story is the why, not the how.
The first part of it is the why.
Yeah.
And then when we get to part 2, we'll be working on how. When we get to part 3, we'll be working on what.
Okay, gotcha, well, okay, I've taken enough time. What I'm wanting to do is, yeah, we need to be more in the.
Yeah, you'll need to have some group meetings. Is that the schedule? May I? I think I might come in. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna let you guys work out the details of how you'll get together, when you'll get together, but let me know so that I know when and how to check back in with you and make sure that we're on track, okay? All right, so we're not gonna dive into lesson 1 today, and that's partly because we decided to go ahead and start October 3rd because we have so many that aren't here. I felt we needed to give them a time to catch up with us. So, but I do want to introduce it and give you an idea of what you're going to be doing. But before we get to that, we need to go down. If you go to towards the end of the document you received today, you will find that I included the appendix. Oh, I'm in the wrong document. Okay. So if you go down to the appendix, in the appendix there is a series of worksheets that we're going to be working on a little bit at a time. These are the ones that I was talking about that have a progress report and then a due date. So I'm going to start introducing them one lesson at a time. I'll introduce another worksheet. And these are going to be a very important part of getting to know your community. Some of them, like this first one, you guys can work on answering on your own. And I think it'll be good, really, to think about the positive aspects of your community, the assets your community has. Then, as we go on, we're going to start researching some of the assets that maybe aren't things that you know are here, but they are things that are here in this community that can help the people that you're working with. We'll also look at needs that you've observed, needs that have been verbalized to you. For instance, one of the things that comes up in Billings a lot is people will say, the transportation system here is terrible. And it is. Having lived in Russia, in Moscow, which has one of the best public transportation systems in the world, I got back to Montana and I was like, this is awful. I would be like, I'm gonna take the bus to college and save a little gas. It was almost as far to the bus stop as it was to the college to walk. So I thought, well, that's not really gonna work. I might as well either just walk, which was like 2 miles with all of my school books, or just take my car. And I ended up taking my car most of the time. But if you don't have a car, then how do you get where you need to be? And so not long ago, we had a situation where one of our gals had broken her ankle. She needed to go to her dentist that was on 48th Street. The bus stopped at 32nd Street. So how do you get to your dentist if the bus stops that far short of the dentist office? So that's a need that I have had verbalized to me. There are other needs that maybe you've observed. So those are the types of things we're going to be going through. The first one that I want you to start working toward, it is going to be due November 21st. We'll check up on what progress you're making on 11/14, so November 14th. And it is the Community Assets Observed worksheet. This information can be gathered individually or as a group. You might do like what Aunt Beth was just suggesting, write your own thoughts down, and then when you come together as a group, you can combine them into one. You might assign somebody to take the forms, and while everybody's sharing their thoughts, type them into the form so that you can put them all into one form, or you might even just collect them all and copy and paste, however you guys want to do that. Take time to sit down and consider what assets have you seen among those you are working with. Consider what strengths you have observed, things like skills, knowledge, characteristics, cultural strengths, and individual talents. Sometimes when we look at a culture that isn't our own, it's easy to see the cultural weaknesses. But there may be strengths in the culture around you that you have never observed before that can actually help them in facing some of the issues that they're facing. Sometimes it's really hard to spot them, but it's also really important because to look for them because it helps us to get to know that culture a little bit better. So that is the community assets observed, and if you look at it, it has a column for skills, a column for talents, knowledge, character, and culture. All right, let me just make sure I've covered everything I wanted to up to that point. All right, I think so. So let's go back up. Sorry, my stomach is very much appreciative of the pizza. I'm sorry, I have the full document, so I have to get through all of these pages here. So for the next section, for part 1, so that's lessons 1 through 5 of part 1, you have all that time to complete the next passage for study. So instead of having to do it all in one sitting like we did it today, you'll be able to work on it a little bit from now to October 31st, I believe is, yes, it's due October 31st. So that gives you quite a bit of time. It gives you a whole month to be working on this. And it's going to look at Matthew 25, 34 through 40. It is fairly extensive, but I'll be honest with you, of the 5 passages for study that we're going to cover, the one we just did today, and this one are 2 of my favorites out of 5. So 2 of my favorites. So I like them all. But this one gets into some really interesting things, like what is almsgiving, and what are alms deeds, and what does that need? You know, it's something that Scripture talks about in several places. So it gets into that. There are a lot of word studies in it. It's also going to be looking at various stories in the Scriptures and comparing them to Matthew 25 and looking at that. That's part 3. And then the last section is, like I said, it's one of my favorites. So again, it's going to work very much like the one we did today. Very similar in the setup. I tried to keep them as similar as I could so that you can kind of be used to and know what to expect when you get into them. We're not doing theme verses. We're not doing the purpose statement. Your assignment for the vision story for part 1. So again, you'll have until October 31st on this. Review the tips and description of a vision story in the introduction. As you go through the process of identifying your why for your purpose statement, which you guys have already done that, but as you're building on it through this section of the course, begin writing your story. Share in detail why do you do what you do. Express it with the intent to inspire and motivate others to join in the work. So there's that idea of inspiring again. You may be the one who are re-inspired down the road. Then complete a rough draft of your why story before lesson 5. So that should put us at about October 31st.
Where are you reading from?
That was page 34 that she was on.
Any questions on that? I think we already talked about it quite a bit. Okay, so then before our next lesson, I'd just like for you to read through the lesson 1 material. It's lesson 1, A Life That Magnifies. And the challenge that's there, you will actually do, let's see, you will actually do that challenge and have it ready for the class on the 10th. So you don't have to have it ready by next week. It's pretty simple.
What page is the challenge?
My pages are off just a little bit. I have it on 39, but it might be
the class.
I see the challenge, it's our page 38.
okay. Okay, so your challenge is going to be basically to write about the material you covered and then share on Facebook group. What does a life that magnifies look like? So you'll go through that material, and then after we've had class and we've discussed it a little bit, then you'll do a challenge. There isn't a huge amount of reading to do there. It's pretty large font, so it might look like several pages, but it's not that much. It's like 12-point font, so. And I think that covers everything that we need to have ready for next week. Any questions?
Repeat this one while I'm awake.
What's that?
Could you repeat this while I'm awake?
You can go back and watch the video. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Would you like to close this in prayer?
Sure. Father God, I'm very grateful for this course. I'm very grateful for Rachel. I'm very grateful, Lord, that you are putting us in a position to really contemplate what you're doing in our area, what you're doing in our lives. And Father, I pray that you'll help each one of us as we make this a even more thorough study. I know that I've been challenged to do so in several areas. I pray that you'll help us to help this to become part of our religion, our worship to you, our very life core that we live out every day. And Lord, I pray that you'll bless each one of us as we study. Help us, Lord, to be faithful in it, not to take it out of context, but to make sure that it's part of what you're teaching us. And help us to see it as a whole. And please, Lord, would you direct our steps as we determine our why? Because that's really the most important thing right here. And it's not about what we want, but it's all about what you want. And we do know that you want us to exercise this very important part of that true religion and undefiled is to visit the fatherless and widows in their distress.